It's okay. Let's do this. Thank you very much. Well, I mean, this was an idea, so I'm glad you were game, Ray.
I was game. I was pleasantly surprised that Brian was game.
And thank you, Brian, for making room because we arrived last night to New York and it's immediately business.
Anna, do you want to give a little bit of a setup of what we are going to talk about and the dynamic we have today?
Absolutely. So it's great for all of us to be here. And by all of us, I mean Brian Morrissey, who is former editor-in-chief and president of DigiDay, and now the founder of the Rebooting. If you're not reading Rebooting, you're missing a lot on the present and future of media, technology, brands, and agencies. So sign up rebooting.com. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining us here. Because Ray and I in the last episode, we talked about brands and their functionality and identity and the interplay between two. And at the end of every episode, we have a hit list. And the hit list was Jaguar's rebrand. That was 2 weeks ago. And the LinkedIn and Twitter or X were up in flames among everyone who had an opinion. Everyone had an opinion about it. So that was my hit. And Ray's hit was an omelette, a Japanese omelette.
Yes.
The subgenre of gazillion people. And I got into it after I heard about it.
I love Japanese omelets. I can talk about those.
I know.
Rice. Rice.
Rice.
So
I think they said omelet.
Omelette
it's omelette, but on top of rice called omelette.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great.
You know about it, Brian?
It's
I didn't know about that, but I know I always looked at any time in Japan the people preparing omelets with chopsticks. It's like amazing skill.
Yes.
This
It's
is
an
next
art.
level because it's
next
done
level.
in such a way you cut it and it falls over rice.
See, that's now become your obsession.
Yeah.
You have to see, Ray sent me some videos. Yeah, I had to look it up online.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then we were, so this is not dying down, this conversation about Jaguar and rebrand. And we thought it would be good to have, especially now that Jaguar unveiled the car. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to have opinion about that as well. And strangely enough, the ad fits perfectly with the car. So, which people didn't know at the time. And we thought it would be a good idea to talk about a wider context of brands and their creative and communication through the lens of media that you bring, lens of brands that both Ray and I bring, and then lens of creative that Ray is an expert in, but that I also bring in. So Ray, whenever you're ready, I hope this setup worked.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
So what I'm kind of curious about, and particularly, the reason why we wanted to have you, Brian, and by the way, Brian, I was just trying to think when the first time that you and I met, and I think it must have been like 20 years ago.
It might have been, honestly.
It must have been. Yeah.
Probably when you joined AKQA.
But I like when I first met you, I was still at RGA because I distinctly remember. Yeah, I was still at RGA, and you must have been at Ad Age, maybe Ad Week, one of those.
Ad Week. Cub reporter, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, way back when, 20 years fast forward, and everybody's been talking about it, and we are recording this on December 3rd, which is a day after the reveal of the actual product, as Anna mentioned. But even before that, what I was kind of curious about was how it became a politicized topic and how now individuals like Elon Musk would have such an enormous influence on the spread of something like this. So like when you and I talked about this 2 weeks ago, and at that time on Twitter, you only had about 5 million views on Twitter, or actually X. And then within like 2 to 3 days, it ballooned to over 150 million views. And I think it was the Elon effect. So the question that I actually have for you, Brian, is, and this is an ongoing topic that you have on your podcast, which is about media, culture, and technology. And then just to cut to the chase, is mass media dead? Meaning that like this didn't spread because of mass media. it spread because of an individual who happens to be enormously influential, and he himself happens to have the kind of reach that no mass brand or no mass media has ever had, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So that, and then,
Well, I have thoughts as well, but I'll let Brian
yeah,
talk
and
first.
I don't want to make it about the election or the politics or the whatever, but I feel like in the past 4 years, are we finally seeing the death of mass media? Or is it just like advertising? Is that overblown?
I would say yes and yes. I mean, we are
Yes and yes,
definitely
okay.
seeing the crack up of mass media. I mean, it's been happening forever, not forever, but for the last like decade. And I think the election just brought this all sort of front and center. And, it's been called the podcast election, but it was very clear is that the influence of mass media and particularly journalism, mass journalism, has been in decline, and it's less effective than it has been. And I think you're right on about this being a story. I think timing is everything, right? So this happened in the aftermath of the election. I don't think it's a coincidence that this became a big deal when it did. I think if this happened a couple of years ago, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. I mean, to me, it's like 4 stories, right? There's a business sort of case study, which is Jaguar as a brand is a classic legacy brand that's trying to reinvent itself. It doesn't have a path with its current approach. And I think its reputation is far bigger than its reality. It sold 64,000 cars last year. This is a tiny brand in a market that doesn't have niche brands, really. You need scale in it. And then there's a classic rebrand story, that you and I might have been talking about when I was at Adweek. I would write about like logo rebrands on like Adfreak, and there would be like 4 million commenters, be like, this sucks.
Oh yeah.
And, people love to pile on a rebrand story. But I think like you're saying, like the bigger, the thing that caused this to be much bigger is that it's sort of a story about the changing media landscape with X. Twitter has always punched above its weight, right? As it didn't lead to a lot of traffic or anything. And it was always kind of like a little bit of a niche thing because it was just so diffuse. But, particularly with Elon Musk changing it now being X, it has a conservative bent without a doubt. Now, I think depending on your political persuasion, you could say, well, that's just sort of rebalancing because the mainstream media is overwhelmingly progressive, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think it's any coincidence that it took off there and then spread, right? It spread into quote unquote mass media, and it did become a bigger story than it was. And then the final thing I would say is, cultural institutions are all under sort of duress right now, whether that's, and they're the ones like with progressive leanings, right? You see the attacks on academia, on journalism, on media overall, even going into like government, I really feel like. And I think advertising is next, right? I mean, you saw this with the Bud Light controversy. And let's be real, you both have been in advertising agencies like quite a bit in your careers, right? That's not a place for MAGA hats, right? And then the people who are ascendant right now know that. They know that really well. They know that in RGA, I mean, think about it, like RGA over the pandemic had what was it? It was like prison reform advocate as the CMO. Like, this is not like an industry that is known for.
I did not know that. That I did not know.
Yeah, I mean, like everyone went kind of crazy during the pandemic, and I think that advertising and branding, all the MAGA people are going to be coming after you guys. So good luck.
They're not coming after you.
I closed down your Twitter accounts.
Come on, they've already come after you, Brian. They're already after you.
No, I'm trying to operate a middle ground. No, I mean, I think that is, look, when Jaguar came out with this, what do they call it? Exuberant modernism?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Right? It got roundly attacked by the usual suspects on X. And to me, I don't know, it looked like a typical ad agency stuff to me. I was like really shocked that something like this would get people so bothered.
Anna, what do you think?
Well, that's what, I'm going to build up on that. I first saw it on LinkedIn and not Twitter, just because I spend less time on Twitter than I do on LinkedIn. And for me, it's also what Ray, you were saying is mass media. That for me, it was more like how different expert communities weighed in, people on brand side, on agency side, on creative side, on business side, everyone, how LinkedIn is networked. You don't really you have influencers there, but it's kind of what a mess thing. Things don't go viral the way they go on Twitter. It's just by design. But the fact that I've seen from all angles in my feed was like, oh, maybe this is a new mass aggregation of all these different niches. So that's my point number one. The second point number two is both of you built upon, already mentioned it, that I want to build upon, is that basically, as far as rebrands go, this is far from the worst. Rebrand was horrible for a minute with that box on, or even people forget that Netflix was one called Quickster, and if we stay with traditional brands, you have Tropicana changing. A lot of brands did change their logos, and there was a minor outreach among creative and advertising types for a minute. And then what actually gained scale here is the moment. Is the zeitgeist. So it's I often say when the time is right, anyone can start a trend. When it's not, no one can. And I think, Ray, that I even once told you that in Japan, I heard this expression, kuki wo yomu. I don't know how I'm pronouncing it right. Like kuki wo yomu. A Japanese guy said, it's kind of how do you read a room?
Oh, 空気を読む.
Yes, I'm not pronouncing it. Yes. Read the room. And they used to explain, how do you read the room in the sense of promoting an idea or so I think this is what it is. Everything right now in culture is so politicized that any sort of output is viewed through the lens. You're either Vogue or MAGA. In a good old social media dichotomy, So in a sense, the moment you hear this ad is inoffensive. People can like it, not like it, but it's not. But it was read and it's androgynous and the colors are exuberant and it's futuristic and it's not nostalgic and it's not heritage and history that Jaguar is known for and so on. So interpretation is immediately through political lens. So for me, the question was, so what do brands do now in their cultural output? When interpretation of no matter what they put out, because the atmosphere is so politically charged that it's going to interpret it in a certain way.
I think the thing that, Brian, that you mentioned, timing is everything. And this is totally speculation, but my guess is that there must have been a conversation about launching this at CES as opposed to at Art Basel. But I would imagine that the conversation must have been that, CES is too crowded. There'll be too many things launching. So let's find another timing. And also, let's reach out to a crowd that they may not have reached out to, perhaps younger, perhaps, more hip crowd at places like Art Basel in Miami.
Yeah.
And then it just so happens that this year coincided with the presidential election and Trump winning. And that was the timing of the announcement of the launch was a few weeks after that. So I don't think it was intentional that it was right after the presidential election. I think I could almost tell that they must have gone through the logic of, let's do something around CES. Oh, it's too crowded. And then let's find another timing. And it just happens that it was close to a political moment. So it was already a hot topic. And then it just happens that those things were close enough that it caught on the kind of zeitgeist. And on top of that, I think, just one individual in Elon Musk who is essentially a super spreader. And he was the instigator of this whole explosion. And this is only speculation, but I kind of wonder if it wasn't for Elon Musk tweeting A, had it become the kind of attention that it created, and B, if it became as politicized as it has become.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because, I mean, sometimes you lose sight. I mean, Jaguar's in a really weird position, right? Like it's not working as a brand, right?
No.
Like, I mean, and they're switching over to all EV, okay? And like it's doing it at a time when EV sales are struggling, right?
Yeah.
They have to shut down production all of next year. They're not gonna sell a car next year, right? And they came up with a concept car. They didn't come out with like a production car. This is a concept. This is not going that nobody is going to be sitting in that car. I don't know what they're going to produce or when they're going to produce it, but they didn't produce anything. This is just a concept. And so to think that all of this is over a concept car from a
for
really
a brand
small,
that no one even mentioned for many, many, many years. You know, it's not like we're talking about Tesla or someone.
Right. And they're trying to swap out their customer base. I mean, their customer base is in their like late 50s, right? They're at best, I guess there's like an English heritage brand. And I think that's where it's sort of tapped into. I think part of the whole MAGA thing is there's always nostalgia in a lot of these conservative and populist movements. And there's a lot of nostalgia of the way things were. Now, forget the fact that this legacy brand has no modern function. It does not have a clear path in the modern auto market, right? And so a lot of what people, I guess, get upset about a lot of times when it comes to these old brands is some memory of them in the past, not their actual, present. Like, because people are saying, oh, this is a heritage of England, and this is the royal family had Jaguars. It's owned by Tata.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what are we talking about here? Like, Tata owns this thing. It's being like carried by Land Rover, but they're trying to swap out their customer set. And so they can afford, I think it's an interesting branding story though, because they can afford, how do you swap out your customer set, right? They need to appeal to a totally different customer. They're going to try to get this thing that's going to be like $100,000 plus per car, go ultra luxury, and to be all EV. I mean, I don't know. That's an interesting branding and business pivot to me, beyond all the political stuff.
And then I would add to that, so Ray, I do think there is something else. I don't think that necessarily it was like CES is too crowded. I think they on purpose want to align themselves with the art and the creative class crowd, and that's who they want to attract, and that's what that crowd is. So that didn't. That's my read. You may as well be right, but my read was that they wanted, like, with the color, with the art, with the
I don't disagree with that.
Global creative class, we are going to actually launch a car at the art event rather than a tech event, because this is such a radical reinvention, going electric, in conceptually going electric, that I also think that they also wanted to kind of peel off their category completely. But that said, if they launched it in a different time and in a different context, I don't think it would be as much of an uproar.
And again, this is in hindsight, and just, it's easy for me to say after the fact, but I think they said too much during the initial launch teaser. And I watched the launch event video yesterday. They're saying too much, and when it comes to the product, I'm not.
They don't have anything
guy.
to show. It's like in journalism they say show don't tell, but like if you don't have much to show, that you're gonna do a lot of talking, right? Like, and
they're doing too much talking. Let the product, and then leave it at that. I think they're just kind of shooting themselves in the foot by saying too much. And when it comes to the actual product design of it, like Brian said, this is a concept car, so nobody's able to drive it. Nobody's able to buy it. So nobody's going to have an opinion about it, or, they aren't able to review it. I happen, just to prepare for this conversation, I happened to watch maybe 2 20-minute videos yesterday about like car experts reviewing the concept car. One guy was this old British guy who owns, a collection of classic cars, and 3 of the cars that he owns happens to be Jaguar cars. And I was surprised that he was actually he had criticism about the branding of it, but when he came to the make of it, he was more positive than I had expected it. And then another guy who was a younger American car expert talked about the new design, and he was, to my surprise, quite positive about it. So I think Jaguar tried too hard to hype this up, and they said too much by saying things that didn't really make any typical marketing, advertising, jargons and blah, blah, blahs. And then on top of that, at the event as well, this chief creative officer of Jaguar came out and spoke for 20 minutes about the details of the car. No offense to him, and I'm sure he's a very respected and capable designer, but I was cringing. I say, just stop talking and let the car do the talking.
I would be interested in both of you to how would you handle this kind of situation where you have to swap out? It seems very clear they want to swap out their existing customers for new customers. Yeah. Like they don't see a path with their existing customers, and so they're going to swap them out. They have to get younger. They have to be more relevant to them, and they have to move the price point up. And on top of that, they have to deal with the fact that they're not going to sell any cars for a year in doing that change.
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
I would say that, so when I saw the actual product reviewed, again, I'm not a car guy, but even to a regular Joe like myself, I was surprised in a good way that they departed so far from what Jaguar was known for from a design perspective in terms of the shape, the form, the angle. It's very angular as opposed to curvy. The colorway, the London blue color and Miami pink color were completely away from the existing color palette as far as I know about the brand. And it was just an unusual choice, but I applaud the boldness in terms of departing from what they were known for. And to answer your question, Brian, I think that they should have just stuck with it. And just the fact that the product itself is such a departure from the past, I think would, again, this is speculation only, but I think could have at least started to talk to a new audience. It might have alienated their old audience, the middle, people in their mid-50s or above who comes to the brand with nostalgia. And I think the design of it could have spoken maybe not as loudly as the cultural backlash that we are seeing, but at least to start targeting a new set of people as opposed to the old segment. Again, it's easy for me to say after the fact, but I think they try to say too much about the brand and try to make up a brand when they should have start with the product, stick with the product, and let the product speak for itself.
But I think, I agree.
Anna, you have experience in this with legacy brands.
That's what I was thinking, Ray, as you were talking. So for them, they clearly did an analysis. They're like, what if we did a car that's still appealing to our old customers and just modern it? And they're like, this is not going to be enough. Like, we're just going to scrap everything. We're going to use the name. It's almost like licensing. It's intellectual property. It's just a name. Mm-hmm. And they're like, our product is going to be completely new. We're going to lead with the product-led branding that we talked about before. And we're just going to say it's Jaguar, but it can be any other name almost. It's such a radical departure. But I think that was the matter of their survival, or of like what Tata figured was, you know what, it doesn't really matter. We're not making money. We're not going to make money out of those people. If we want to keep this brand going, it needs to look completely different. So, Brian, you want to chime in because then I'll continue.
Well, I'm just wondering, what's the point of a brand then, right? Like, I mean, do you have to, it's not like, they obviously have to evolve, right? All brands have to evolve
Yeah.
and stuff, and they're all made up, let's be real here. But like,
They
if you're
got
just
so-
gonna take a name that people like recognize and take the Authentic Brands Group, like PE playbook, and be like, all right, well, who cares? People, it's lodged in people's brains somewhere. We can just slap it on whatever. Like, what is the sort of point of,
But there is a brand strength in that. There is a set of associations and emotions still. And now they just want to have a new set of associations and emotions.
So, there's actually a car brand that managed to transition their old image and be able to target a new set of audience. And it's Cadillac.
oh, I thought you were going to say the Yugo.
Which one?
Exactly, Ray. Exactly.
That's a deep cut.
It's a Yugoslav car that was the only car that was exported to US market.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Tiny. Yeah.
I think it was some insider joke that I'm not aware of.
But
Yeah.
see, like
Yeah.
You didn't get them in Japan. You guys had
No, definitely not. Obviously not. Yeah. But just to finish the train of thought that I had, because about 20 years ago, this was like around 2000. One of the first accounts that I ever worked on when I was a junior designer was Cadillac. And it's this classic old 1960s American car brand that was popular among grandpas, in Midwest. Yeah. And like from the late 90s to like 2000-ish. And I worked on it for a couple of years, so I didn't see it through. But they were deliberately trying to shift away from being a car for grandpas in Midwest, quite literally, in Detroit. And I went to school in Michigan, like all grandpas were literally driving it. And then also around that time, and I can't remember exactly the timeline, but the big SUVs started to come out. And like the hip hop crowd, some crowd started to embrace these humongous SUVs. So around that time, around 2000, Cadillac deliberately, and then they didn't do a drastic rebrand. It was a gradual thing that they did over probably about 10 years or so. And I would say they did a relatively good job of shifting from that dusty old grandpa image to, a hipper, cooler crowd who listens to hip hop. And also like around that time, like, 20 plus years ago, they had a product placement in The Matrix, the first Matrix movie. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was kind of a shock for a lot of people because nobody thought of a Cadillac placed in a sci-fi movie like The Matrix. And it was the first time in a long time, if not ever, a car like a Cadillac was portrayed in a heroic way. And I think they did a pretty good job of transitioning from a legacy. I don't know if they were dying the same way that the Jaguar is, but they definitely made a conscious, deliberate decision to make that transition from an old image to a new one. And I think they did it relatively well.
But I wonder whether that's possible now in this kind of fragmented, like I call it.
That's what I wanted to say. The time was different. Brands always reinvented themselves, Ray. I think Cadillac is an amazing example, but it's not the only one. Because when you look at the retail brands I worked for, like how Banana Republic reinvented itself from being like this upcycled military garb safari into 1990s metrosexual, like a yuppie crowd, that was a complete, and people embraced it because, it was more gradual. And Brian, as you said, like the fragmented versus mass. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at Esprit as well, and that's what Brian asked earlier, the only way for brands to survive is if they radically reinvent themselves, or they're going to stay small. So because look at across luxury brands, do you think that what they're producing now has anything to do with what they were producing while the founders were alive.
Mhm.
It's just that it happened over the period of 10 years, as your example of Cadillac was, or even more.
Yeah.
Like how you slowly push, you start making, let's take Louis Vuitton. You start from luggage, you start adding ready-to-wear. Marc Jacobs introduced that, and you start playing with it. They didn't have ready-to-wear. They didn't have any clothes before that, Louis Vuitton.
Mhm.
It was a travel. It was a luggage brand.
So do you think the point that Brian that you're making, or the question that you're asking, is you don't think it's possible potentially for Jaguar to reinvent itself because A, the media landscape is too fragmented, and B, culture moves too quickly. Is that sort of the point?
Well,
that
I guess it's like the playbook, I think, has to be totally different. And also we have to come to terms with the fact that a lot of brands need to go to hospice care. Like, I mean, let's be real. Like, we simply have too many of them. We can't keep adding these brands that mean something because we keep inventing new brands. And so, like, some are going to have to go away. Like that's just the natural order of things.
Yeah,
we created a lot of brands in the 20th century. We have to be okay that some are, going to go to the brand place in the sky. Like, I mean, that's going to be the reality. And I think we're seeing a lot of brands that are trying to cling to some kind of relevance or invent some kind of relevance. And it's kind of messy, I think.
But do you think that would be a choice for the executives at Tata and Jaguar to say, or
can I tell you something, Ray, from my own experience?
Sure.
Rebrands are incredibly expensive.
Yes.
Sometimes it's easier to just scrap it all and do it again. It's like executives underestimate the amount of material investment, technological investment in time, and it takes 3 to 5 years. So Jaguar could have done that. They could have said, let's keep the shell, let's make transition to electric. They're like, you know what? Forget it. We're just going to create a completely new design with a completely new interior. The only thing we are keeping is the name, which is the same what Authentic Brands Group do. At the end of the day, with Brooks Brothers, with Vince, with like Reebok, all those brands, what are they doing? They're doing some collaborations. They're milking the cow as they go because they don't want to invest. So that's one model. But Jaguar didn't want to go that route at all. If you go that route, be ready to invest hundreds of millions, or maybe automotive brands, and for retail brands, for Banana, for Esprit, that is the investment of tens of millions over the course of 3 to 5 years. Because imagine, not only you need to change the quality, not only you need to change the design, what we did at Esprit Elevate, then you change distribution, then you penetrate a new market, then you spend marketing dollars on carpet bombing for a year across mass media or everything. And then you do that for 5 years. That is the thing. When a rubber hits the road, it's all about the money.
And the ego.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's gonna rally the troops with, we're gonna milk this until we can't milk it anymore. I mean, everyone's gonna try to reinvent it, but at the same time, like I was wrong. It's like in the US, it sold 8,284 cars last year.
8,000.
This is like a miniature like brand. And so, I mean, I think about it in media. Like media has so many of these brands that are like zombies. They're like, so I give them credit for trying. I mean, this is, to me, is like, it's a Hail Mary at the end of the day for this brand. I mean, because it's the way it's going, it's like, what is going to change? Like, what is actually going to change to make this brand like as relevant as it was during its heyday? Very little, right? So you can either like cater to it and care for it like in hospice, or you can try to like turn stuff around. Like, I don't know if that's going to work. Like, I mean, it seems like it's trying to become like Maserati. Like, like you don't see many Maseratis around.
So does Tata have other electric vehicles?
I'm not sure.
I believe so. But
all right. So if they do have, they probably have already set up production and all of that. So they're just say, hey, let's just use Jaguar name and use the production that we already have, and we're going to make more money because Jaguar brand still has in its mind some sort of presence.
I mean, they're investing in an entire new EV infrastructure for this, and so I mean,
If they
Auto is a
don't,
very
and they're going to say, hey, we're going to do something new, but we're going to slap an old brand to that. They're going to do better with the Jaguar name than with some other name, with the Tata Electric name. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're just taking the best of both worlds.
What did you let me ask about
Yeah.
the design. What did you think? Let's have some
The car
logo
design
talk.
or the brand design?
No, the brand design.
Brand
This
design.
is logo talk.
Yeah, no, I thought it was such a missed opportunity. If they were to rebrand, they should have kept the cat, the leaping Jaguar. And yeah, they should have, if anything was to be removed, it should have been the typeface, not the icon.
What about the car?
Yeah.
The car, I'm kind of indifferent about it, neutral about it. I'm not overly critical of it. I like I said earlier, I do respect the level of departure that they were willing to take, and unusual design choices in some places, especially in the interior of the car.
But that's the only thing you can influence, because so many cars look the same because of performance requirements and so on. So you can really design the interior, or I don't know, colorways or tech inside. That is, for me, it doesn't look differentiated. I haven't been inside.
Not that much.
So that is, but also the question is, can you really differentiate that much these days in terms of cars? Like stopping short of creating a Cybertruck. But even when you look at the Cybertruck generations, they all look very similar.
I don't know, it's got Cybertruck vibes though.
It does. It does.
But
I agree.
Cars will look now.
Yeah.
That's like.
I mean, I will say this: like, I'm not like any car. I have an Altima, so you don't even. I'm not a car person.
Or whatever.
But like, I don't understand like car design itself. Like, I'm glad that they're at least trying like new kinds of car design. Like, it seems like everything's like was very, and I understand it's hard to manufacture something new, but at least they're trying. Like, it looks different.
Different enough.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this for the Cybertruck: when you see them going around, you notice it's still like, it's a little garish, and I'm not sure what kind of statement it's making, but you at least notice it. So I think it's okay.
I felt that when I saw the new Jaguar cars revealed, I sort of felt the same way that I felt about Tesla Cybertruck the first time.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell is this?
Right.
But then a year or 2 years have passed and I see them in my neighborhood running around. I think like the first few months, people were almost ashamed to admit that they wanted to buy it. But then now, the people who drive, no offense and no judgment, but people who drive them, I think they are proud of driving the Cybertruck. And then my sense about the Jaguar car in 2 years' time is that it will get mocked when it first comes out, but I think there'll be enough people who will buy it. It's not, I don't know if it will be enough people to revive the brand to what it was, but I think enough people.
Yes, the same thing, Ray, that you had with Elon Musk and his ex-post like tweet. You need one person, you need a Kardashian to sit in a custom color and there you go. And I know we have Brian only for a couple of minutes. So for me, the bigger picture of all of this is, do other categories need to go electric, literally, like scrap everything they've been known for? Because I know in retail, brands have been doing that. Look at Abercrombie's revival. They scrapped that teenage model abuse, the preppy aesthetic, and they're like, we're just going to do what is popular now. And we're going to do it faster than anyone else. So our chase is retail term when you quickly produce something and people are wearing and we're just going to do like, what do customers need? They need dresses in the summer. Make a lot of dresses in the summer. So literally be super responsive to market. And to an extent, that's what Esprit did. That's what Banana does. That's what a lot of the brands that you see that had a aesthetic point of view back when they were founded we're just going to make popular stuff. And I feel like that this is our own future across different categories, that all you have is a name, but what you're actually creating is what is going to sell.
At the given moment.
Responsiveness to market, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's harder though in auto, right? I mean, this is an industry in complete change and they're becoming software driven. There's a great viral video of the former Ford CEO talking about how much they screwed up software because they bid all of their suppliers against one another. And they always do this. And they did the same thing with software. And that's where Elon Musk got them because he took the Apple approach and it's like all in one, unified. And they've got people writing software, different providers that don't talk to each other. And I think, it's just a major shift going on in the auto industry where I feel like the branding stuff it's interesting and it's great to talk about, but like this is an industry that is, and we've seen it with the transition to EVs. It's been a disaster for a lot of these companies and the subsidies going away are not going to be good, at least in the US. So, you both talk about it a lot it is ultimately going to be a product that decides this, not some kind of video film because it was very expensive. It's expensive when they call it a film.
True. By the way, it's rumored that it was an in-house agency. No offense.
Oh, good. See, that'll like Ad Age. You could have like a column in Ad Age about, this proves that in-housing is the worst.
Oh, the bravest CMOs. And well, thank you, Brian.
Hey, it was brave. It was brave.
He was brave.
Let's give credit where credit is due. Too much bravery in marketing is not very brave. This one was brave. They at least got attacked by a lot of people.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for stopping by, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's fun. Bye.
Bye. So Ray, do you want to move into hits?
Before that, why don't we do our summary first?
I forgot about summary. Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one thing that you said made me think, which is the electrification that's happening to the automotive industry. Does the same thing need to happen to other industries as well?
Yeah.
And you talked about the apparel industry and how the companies that once had a clear point of view and clear design aesthetic of their products are now shifting to reacting to the moment, pumping out products that they think they would sell. Mm-hmm. And audience seems, Shein is sort of the classic example of a company that didn't really have a point of view about design.
But so unfortunate thing is sort of the luxury brands now, when they started streetwear and sneakers. And I didn't mean the literally electrification.
I get it.
No, I know you didn't either. I just want to go back to, how Bob Dylan plugged in guitar and that's like went electric because it was a completely new genre that was created. So in a sense, I think that like electric cars are a new genre of cars. So that's what I'm thinking. Like, what does it look like going electric in hospitality, in maybe in retail, in sports? What would it mean going in for Nike going like what is that change of the organizing principle of the industry? I saw a lot of that in retail, and that's how brands are around just in the name, not a product designed. Or not even in advertising.
So I think my takeaway and my curiosity is what's the next industry that needs a paradigm shift? When Tesla came onto the market, they didn't necessarily change the car itself. They did change it with software being the major part of it.
Cadillac story. It was a slow shift.
Apple didn't necessarily change personal computing the second time that Steve Jobs came back, but they changed the perception of computers.
But with also the phone. They changed
the iMac, the iPhone.
iPhone
Apple
was
stores.
that paradigm shift when everyone went from flip phones to smartphones.
True. Yeah. So what this conversation took me to, my mind went, was what are the next industries that could use that paradigm shift?
For me, what my takeaway is actually, what is the rebrand strategy? When that continuity and linearity, it's not gonna, like linear change, incremental change, is not gonna get you where you need to get. You're not gonna attract new customers doing what Cadillac did. You're not gonna attract your customers by slowly shifting your aesthetic or having a marketing campaign or moving the focus of your dollars towards younger audience. That's not gonna cut it. When you really need, in order to stay around, you really need that paradigm shift, which means in order to reach new audience, you need a new product.
Yeah.
And
So I would say
for me, it's more of a survival strategy, not just growth strategy. I want to say, how do you remain in the market, period, not grow in the market, remain. What is the rebrand strategy going on? Because I think we're going to see way more Jaguars than Cadillac rebrands across industries.
Possibly. So I think just to finish the conversation about Jaguar, again, it's easy to say this in hindsight after the fact, but their strategy, their rebranding shouldn't have been rebranding. It should have been the product strategy, product reintroduction strategy as opposed to rebranding strategy.
I agree with that. I actually agree with that because I think, and that's more and more I think about it, is that product-led branding is what is going to make brands survive. At the end of the day, what makes Abercrombie successful is the fit is great, much better than before. The quality is up, and then you find designs you want. So it really goes back to, do you have that quality product? Do you have a desirable product? And then how do you build communication and brand around that? And at the end of the day, what Nike did was they sped up Pegasus. And, when you see for Nike and Adidas competitors, they're product innovations. And that's why I don't necessarily think that Nike and Adidas have anything to worry about, is to reach the scale. You do need product innovation, but you also need categories, and you need the fashion aspect of it, and you need other sort of verticals to really succeed. But On was product innovation at the end.
Definitely. Cool. All right, shall we move to our hit list?
Yes, and honestly, you know what? I didn't plan this. We arrived yesterday from Miami, and this is what waited for me. I know, it's here.
Nice. So
that I have, because it's gonna. I know. It's I was very happy to see it in alive. So I would say,
is that the final copy?
Yes, that's I got 10 copies gratis. Okay. I'm going to have in Paris on Monday the book launch. So I'll have some for the journalists, and they're sending me some to hotel there.
Yeah, so you're having your event in Paris next week.
On December night, hosted by Vivendi.
Oh, okay. Well, congratulations and good luck with that live event. I wish I could say I could be there, but I can't. So I will.
I wish you, maybe in New York. There's going to be one in London.
You should.
And then New York, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So when I met up with you this summer, you were talking about finishing the book. Well, earlier in the summer. And it was coming out in the fall. And now finally it's here. So congratulations. I know it's a lot of work to write a book. So
thank you.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing the actual copy in person soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Remy.
So my hit list is a tiny discovery that I came across just a couple of days ago. And it's not that groundbreaking, but I was quite fascinated by it. And it's an old podcast that's been around for a couple of years by Rick Rubin. And he's got this podcast called Tetragrammaton, where he interviews musicians, artists, creators, a lot of, famous creators. And recently, he started a segment or a new version of the podcast called Unexpected Conversations. Mm-hmm. And there have been 2 of those episodes. One was in September, and then another one just came out this past week. And it was a conversation with Rick Rubin himself with this guy named Richard Feynman. Do you know who that is?
Richard?
Feynman. He's a Nobel Prize winning physicist. Mm-hmm. He's dead. He died many, many years ago, 20 years ago or so. Yeah. But it's a conversation between Rick Rubin and this deceased person. And then when you look at the description of the podcast, the episode, it just says Rick Rubin talks with Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, and not much detail about it. So I looked up, hey, what's going on? Like, is this AI? Is this fake? So how he made it was that he took an existing interview from the past and then edited it. And then Rick Rubin himself, asks question, right? And then inserted his voice
Does he
in
have
between.
permission to do that from the estate?
I would imagine. So the first one was with Jim Morrison, the Doors singer. And then the second one was this, very famous, internationally acclaimed physicist.
I think it's unbelievably smart concept. I think it's because it's like recontextualizing the material that you would not necessarily be drawn to. We maybe know it exists, but when would you listen to Jim Morrison's interview?
I thought he was really, really smart, clever, very beautiful. Like when I listened to it, and then like I read Richard Feynman's book when I was in my high school physics teacher recommended that I read his book. And it was just a biography. It wasn't about physics. It was just about life and super easy read. And, this is like 30 years ago. And it made an impression on me. And then I didn't really, I'm not in physics or science, so I didn't really follow his work. And then he passed away maybe 20 years ago. And I hadn't heard his name. And it just happened to pop up on my podcast feed. And what I found so refreshing was that he wasn't using any fancy technology. He was using editing and things like that, but he wasn't using like AI to recreate this person's voice or anything like that. I mean, audio is such an old medium. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised, maybe this isn't a new concept, but mixing something that exists in the past and then making it sound like as if it's a recent conversation that took place between two real people, in case it wasn't. But still, it felt very authentic. It didn't feel like fake. Yeah. So I do, if you're a Jim Morrison fan, definitely, if you happen to like physics or science or, know who Richard Feynman is. And he does talk about
Feynman's hypothesis or something like that.
No, his work is very famous.
Then, no, it's coming back. Yeah. But you see that I think it's great example. I think we've seen that, as you said, it's not new, but I think it's amazing because I think that what culture is, it's all about curation, editing, and remixing. So this is one of the one of the examples of how do you take noteworthy events, texts, materials from the past and recontextualize it. So I do think that is how creativity is in a remix now. Really is. The creativity is how do you creatively combine, because there is creativity in how the questions that are asked and how it was edited.
Yes. Yeah. And they edited it so that the conversation feels very natural. You hear the nodding of the interviewer, Rick Rubin, and the nodding and the size and the little details of a conversation, so that it's like one conversation between two people who just happen to exist in two different times in history. Yeah. So I definitely recommend, this podcast has been around for quite a while, for a couple of years now, but this episode just came out recently and I was mesmerized at myself for being so into it. So that's my hit list. Tiny thing, but it gave me a lot of joy, aha, and this is what creativity culture is about. Yeah.
It definitely is. And I would encourage our listeners to think of other examples, because we are seeing that a lot in fashion with the revival of archives going back and, just recontextualizing that. But I do think that we should see probably more of that, because there is a gold mine of human creativity. And if we can be creative by again, 3% rule, changing something just by 3% and packaging it as a new product, there is a lot to be gained, because the creativity is really in the DJ, in that remix.
Yeah, in the DJ, the craftsmanship of, mixing the sound so that it sounds natural, those little details definitely matter. So I highly recommend it.
Cool. Yeah, cool.
All right, with that, wraps up another conversation. All right, so if I don't talk to you before you go to Paris, have a safe trip.
Thank you.
And talk to you in 2 weeks.
That sounds like a plan.
Awesome. All right. Thanks,
Perfect.
Vanya.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Anna.
much, guys. This was great.
Bye.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Bye.